What's going on, everybody? It's Antonio from Ikari Press. We're on the Indiegogo, $62,063. Santana Baby Triple Cover Pack is, of course, still ongoing. If you want it, head on over to Indiegogo or just type in IkariPress.com. It'll take you right there. Link, of course, is in the description. All right, so I was on NerdSync, if I can get this to load, because I want to show this video. Yeah, and I don't want the sound, but I want to show this video because I think the visuals on it are fun. So uh, I don't really need audio because I'm gonna run my mouth while he talks. But he said something very interesting, and it kind of sparked the idea for this video, and that being where he started talking about Steve Ditko. And he said that Steve Ditko was the sole creator of Doctor Strange. Now, that's actually pretty true. But the reason this video was done, and it's on the NerdSync channel, as you can see right here, why do Spider-Man and Doctor Strange make the same hand gesture? And this is apparently something that Ditko did in a lot of his books. There was a book called Mr. A that I've seen a couple of panels from, and there, I don't know, it just seemed like he liked drawing the people's hands, and I mean, Mr. A was pretty much, I know Alan Moore said that he based Rorschach from The Watchmen on Mr. A, and he actually talked to Steve Ditko about Watchmen, and he told a story. He said that when he talked to Steve Ditko and mentioned Rorschach, he said, "Ah, yes." He said, "Rorschach, he's like Mr. A, except he's insane." And so that was the story. But if you look at some of the panels from the Mr. A book, he's got his hand kind of in that same hand gesture that Spider-Man and Doctor Strange did. Um, but what sparked the idea for doing this particular commentary was the fact that he said that Steve Ditko created Doctor Strange completely by himself. And again, I think that's probably 80, maybe 90% true, because there's some documentation online. There's receipts. There's a letter from Stan Lee, actually, and this letter was written in 1963. So I was glad I was able to find an excerpt from it. It was written by Stan Lee in 1963 to a gentleman by the name of Jerry Bales. Jerry Bales is, they call him the godfather of comic fandom. Used to write fan letters to DC Comics, get fan groups together and stuff. A big enough name where if you Google him, he's got a Wikipedia page. He's a person of note in comic fan circles. But I'm glad this particular letter was written by Stan in 1963, because a lot of times when people argue about Stan, because Stan has a reputation of being kind of a credit hog when he was alive. Even when he had fallings out with Jack Kirby, that's pretty well known. And I wish I had that clip of the I think Jack Kirby was doing a radio interview like in the 70s, and they got Stan to call in, and they had they had a little argument on the air. Someone has that on YouTube. I heard it, and I was like, yeah. Stan and Jack were not loving each other at that particular point, but apparently they made up before Jack passed away. But Stan and Steve fell out because Steve says that he is the co-creator of Spider-Man, and Spider-Man, Stan's always said, "Look, I had the idea for Spider-Man. It was my idea. I wanted to do a teenage superhero, all that." And in fact, when Stan had the idea for Spider-Man, he went to Jack Kirby. If anyone remembers, Spider-Man's first appearance is in Amazing Fantasy number 15, and the cover was done by Jack Kirby. Now, Jack Kirby did the cover based on Steve Ditko's design. But there are, and matter of fact, I could have swore I've seen some of those old throwaway Jack Kirby designs, because when they asked Jack to design Spider-Man's costume, and he kind of had this weird kind of clunky spider suit with a mask or something, and he had like a spider gun or something. And someone looked at it. It was someone at Marvel looked at it, and they were like, "Dude, you pretty much just copied Joe Simon's The Fly. That your design for Spider-Man looks like The Fly." And Stan didn't really like the design. And that was something I heard Stan say. He was like, normally, like, Jack is dead on with the costume, but he just couldn't seem to get what the vision that I wanted when he was doing the Spider-Man stuff. So he just couldn't grasp what I was trying to do. And, Steve was someone that was young and up and coming. He gave it to Steve, let him take a crack at it. Steve did it, knocked it out the park. And then they gave Steve's design to Jack, and then Jack did the cover to Amazing Fantasy 15. It was supposed to just be a throwaway issue. A couple months go by, they got the newsstand figures back in. They realized they had a hit, and then the editor went to Stan, or the publisher went to Stan, and he was like, "Yo, that teen superhero you got is a hit, man. Let's get a book out." And so then obviously they gave the book to Steve Ditko to draw, which, as you can see on the screen here, these are very beautifully crafted pages by the comic legend himself. But here is the letter that Stan wrote to Jerry Bells in 1963, where they were talking about Doctor Strange, because they're always trying to expand the line. They had the book Strange Tales, and here it is. Let me read this. "Well, we have a new character in the works for Strange Tales. Just a 5-page filler named Doctor Strange. Steve Ditko is going to draw him. It has sort of a black magic theme. The first story is nothing great, but perhaps we can make something of him. 'Twas Steve's idea, and I figured we'd give him a chance. Although, again, we had to rush the first one too much. Little sidelight, originally decided to call him Mr. Strange, and thought the Mr. bit a bit too similar to Mr. Fantastic. Now, however, I remember we had a villain called Doctor Strange just recently in one of our mags. Hope it won't be too confusing." And okay, so that's Stan Lee in 1963, because I was very happy that letter existed, specifically because a lot of the later interviews that Stan Lee did in the 70s and in the 80s, when he'd be talking about the creation, a lot of times they contradicted themselves and stuff. He'd say one thing in one, and then in the next one he'd say something else, and the framework of the story would be similar, but yeah, little details that were important would get changed. So I was glad that letter came, and it was written in 1963 specifically because it's not old Stan Lee. It's Stan Lee in his prime when he's creating all these characters. So it sounds to me, because there's also some stuff from Steve Ditko where he's saying, "Hey, I came up with this on my own, and then I brought it to Stan," which, again, according to that little passage there, sounds like Stan is confirming that Doctor Strange was already created. Probably it sounds like he didn't have a name for the character, and then Stan blessed us with the name Doctor Strange, because hey, it's Strange Tales, all that kind of stuff. I'm always curious about character creation and who should get proper credit for what, because a lot of times when I talk about brand, they only see they don't have a story yet. They don't have anything to gauge on. They only have Kanan's artwork. And so because they only have Kanan's artwork, and Kanan's artwork is so powerful, that's all they talk about until they ask me a question about the powers, what the characters can do, how the ideas came about and all this kind of thing, because everything that, even a lot of the layouts that you guys have seen, I'm very specific. When Kanan draws something, I'll tell him. Sometimes I'll just like, you know what to do what you want. But sometimes I have very specific ideas. Like the Manasseh Johnson variant, I had very specific ideas for that. I wanted it to look a certain way, so I told Kanan exactly what I wanted, and then he drew the little layout, and then we passed it to Manasseh to do his version. Because sometimes I see things in my mind, like I know some of the covers, I know how some of the covers are going to look in my mind because I want them a certain way, but I don't know how that goes into creation in the reader's mind. As you can see here, there's all this artwork that he's holding up with these comic books for this Spider-Man Fever book, and I don't know who the artist is on this, because this is definitely it's almost like an homage to like a Steve Ditko type style on the artwork that's shown in this video. But again, I just thought that was interesting because I've talked about, I did the video the other day where I was talking about Todd McFarlane and David Michelinie kind of having differing opinions on who created what or who created Venom, where David is pretty clear in saying that he already had those character concepts and ideas before Todd sent him a big picture of a hulking guy in the Spider-Man black suit. But Todd's telling a different story where he's saying, "Hey, I'm coming off Incredible Hulk. I told him I don't want to draw black suit Spider-Man, and I wanted to draw the red and blue Steve Ditko suit because Todd's a big fan of Steve Ditko. In fact, one thing I mentioned in that video was that he added the webbing back underneath Spider-Man's arms because that's what Steve Ditko had designed. And as artists went along over the decades, they just said, "Yeah, I don't like those webs," and they lost them. And Todd was like, "No, I grew up reading Steve Ditko." And John Romita Jr., John Romita Jr. too, but John Romita Sr., John Romita Sr. kept the webs under there. That was classic Spider-Man costume design. So McFarlane felt like those webs should be added back, even though they had been missing for a little while. As you can see right here in this picture of Spider-Man there, notice there's no webbing under the arm there. Because a lot of the artists think the webbing under the arms is stupid. But the artist that actually is drawing the interiors on this page, in that panel that they just showed, he has the old Ditko webbing under Spider-Man's arm. But like I said, it sounds like Steve really pretty much created Doctor Strange by himself with a few little small insights from Stan. But Stan says that he created Spider-Man by himself without Steve. And Steve took issue with that. And even when Stan was trying to squash it, I know there's a letter that's online that Stan sent out. He actually gave a copy to Steve and I guess sent it out for publication or whatever. And it was like, "To whom it may concern, I consider Steve Ditko the co-creator of Spider-Man." And Stan said, there's a BBC documentary called Searching for Steve Ditko, if I'm not mistaken. And it's on. Someone loaded it up on YouTube. It's great. I saw it when it was on television, but yeah, it's at least a decade or so old. But it's a great documentary that if you get a few minutes, check out. Or I think it's either Searching for Steve Ditko or Finding Steve Ditko. And if you get a chance to actually look at it, man, watch the whole thing because it's great. It's got a lot of Marvel history. It's only like an hour, and it really breaks down Steve Ditko's process as far as creating, and why he decided to stop working with Stan Lee and different things like that. But I'm curious what you guys think about stuff like that. Let me know. Get in the comment box. Whew, man, it's a wrap. So, with that being said, I'm going to wrap this video up. And if you want to reach out to me, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and right here on this YouTube channel. Everywhere is at Ikari Press. And if you type in IkariPress.com, it will take you directly to my Indiegogo campaign for my comic book series brand with the phenomenal Kanan White. We're on Teespring. We're on Amazon.com. The links to those are in the description. Thank you guys so much for watching. Like and subscribe. I'm out.